Alright, I had to take a break after the Xbox video because that went on pretty long and obviously my room got hot, but I'm back. Another video, another weekend of doing back-to-back videos, but we're here. Welcome back to I Want to Talk About, the series where I take a topic, I sit on camera, and I blabber about it. And you see the title, another episode in the series within a series. Today, I want to talk about my favorite games of 2007. You know how the series goes at this point. I introduce the year in gaming that I'm talking about, I talk about some big games from the year that I didn't play, I talk about some games that just missed the cut of my two major lists, so games that I probably would have given like a 7 out of 10 to. Then I go into my two lists, the cream before the crop, which are the games that I really enjoyed but weren't quite 10 out of 10, so like 8, 9 out of 10 type games, and then my proper best list with the 10 out of 10 games from a given year. So let's get into the intro of the year, and I don't want to make this intro stupid long because we have a lot of games to discuss in this video. 2007 was perhaps one of the best years in gaming and a year with so many banger titles. But to talk about the gaming landscape a little bit, on the console front, it felt like each system at least had something going for it, and each publisher was doing at least something right. The Wii was absolutely killing it on the market for Nintendo, and with all the exclusive games that dropped throughout the year, it was a great time to be a Nintendo fan. The DS was also still killing it with a lot of big games, and speaking of the DS, in the last video on 2006, I totally glossed over that the DS Lite dropped in 2006. I'm very sorry about that. I only added a little text thing to let you guys know, but yes, by 2007 there was another hardware revision, the Nintendo DS Lite. The original DS was robust enough compared to, say, the original Game Boy Advance as far as not being a super dark screen, but the brighter screen and slimmer form factor for the DS Lite was obviously very welcome, and surely something that helped it sell even more compared to the original, alongside all the big games that were coming out for it. As far as Microsoft, the Xbox 360 wasn't exactly having the biggest year. It helps that the Red Ring of Death controversy was still kind of rearing its head as warranties were extended, but the 360 found some big success specifically in America, thanks in no small part to one blockbuster title that we will absolutely talk about a little bit later. Oh, and it got a hardware revision too, with the Xbox 360 Elite releasing in 2007. It featured a bigger hard drive and the ability to output through HDMI, which these days you might take for granted, but yeah, that was a big deal in 2007. HD gaming, wow. So that was pretty cool, but Sony had a pretty strange year, because with the PlayStation 3, sales were a little bit up, but it was still kind of struggling to get going. It was still super expensive. It helped that Sony had discontinued the 20 gigabyte model of it, which left only the 60 gig model, which was obviously the more expensive one. Games were still kind of starting to trickle out, not super heavily just yet. Blu-rays weren't as heavily adopted as DVDs were, so that wasn't as big of a Trojan horse. And even the PlayStation 2 was still outselling the PS3 kind of across the board. And sure, that thing was a big deal and obviously the highest selling console at this point in time, but yeah, people were still very interested in the last gen machine as opposed to the current gen machine. It did help that the PS2 had one major title to come out late in the year, but we'll get to that when we get to it. If nothing else, at least the PSP was still pushing units for Sony and was still making them some money, perhaps helped by the release of the PSP 2000 model. Supposedly this one was slimmer than the original PSP, but I won't even lie to you, I could barely tell the difference. And on the third-party front, there wasn't a whole lot to talk about from 2007 other than Bungie splitting from Microsoft and going independent, which was a pretty big deal given that Bungie did a lot of heavy lifting for Microsoft as the creator of their flagship franchise, Halo. But there was one thing I found from 2007 that I thought was pretty interesting in the landscape of gaming, outside of the development sphere, more on the content sphere. And 2007 saw the formation of both Ustream and Justin.tv. Nowadays, those are two sites that might make you go, what the hell are those? But these were very big deals back in 2007, as both of them were very early streaming websites. And while they weren't specifically dedicated to gaming, both were incredibly popular among gamers to broadcast their gameplay live. Maybe not in the best quality. I distinctly remember that a lot of those streams were grainy webcam footage or very early capture cards that dropped massive numbers of frames. But again, the means to create live stream gaming content were still there back in 2007. I'll mention that as someone who followed Guitar Hero pretty heavily back in the day, Ustream was basically the hub for Guitar Hero streamers. And while I'm not as familiar with Justin.tv, I know that it saw a ton of success with gamers. Part of the reason I know that is because its gaming-specific section, just a few years later, would be rebranded into a little website you may have heard of and may know today. Twitch. Yes, Justin.tv was in essence the precursor to Twitch, and it was the combination of Ustream and Justin.tv that basically served as like the ground zero for gaming streamers. I'm sure a lot of you have your own favorite gaming streamers. Some of you may even be gaming streamers yourself. These right here are where that all started, and it's kind of interesting to look back on these as if you're looking into like the petri dish of game streaming. I just happened to see that happened in 2007, and I thought that was really fascinating. But hey, I kept the intro short, which is good because we have a lot of games to talk about. Like I said, 2007 brought a lot of bangers, many of which I didn't play. Okay, well, not many of which, but there were quite a few more snubs this year than before. Looking through some of the biggest ones that I could find in terms of big notable games from 2007, Team Fortress 2 is obviously super popular, but I have never played that. I've just seen all the goofy YouTube videos about it. 2007 was the year of the original Assassin's Creed, which I know might be dated and stuff, and obviously the later entries would be better, but this was still a big deal because this is now Ubisoft's mascot, and as a huge Rayman fan, I cry. There was also Bioshock, which I know is well-liked and very, very popular, but I have not played that. The Mass Effect series is really well-loved and fantastic, even if it's not really my kind of thing. There's Portal, which a lot of people love. Again, I believe that actually came in some kind of bundle. I believe it was the Orange Box, which came with a couple other Valve games. Super popular. Again, not my kind of game. There was also The Witcher, which I know is super popular. I've just never played that series or really been that into it. And while this might not be as big as the other ones, I found out right before filming the video that Skate was 2007. And I know Skate's become a very popular franchise. It's even getting a new game sometime soon. But I have always kind of struggled to get into Skate. Maybe it's because I grew up with Tony Hawk, and that was more of the skating game that I played, that the control scheme of Skate was a little weirder to me. But still, it's a pretty notable game. So yeah, that's just the games from 07 that I didn't play. When we get into the ones that I did play, we got a lot to talk about. We do have one game that just missed the cut of my 2 lists, so a game that would have been a 7 out of 10 on my scale. And this might even be a little bit surprising to hear about, because I know this game was not super well liked, but one game from 2007 that I liked probably more than most did, even if it just missed the cut, was Pokemon Battle Revolution. Like the Pokemon Stadium games that I mentioned in previous videos, I have a lot of fond memories with this game, even if quality-wise it might not be anything too spectacular. Much like Pokemon Stadium, this is another one of those games where you kind of need to have a DS and Pokemon Diamond and Pearl to truly get the most out of them. And I do kind of hate that the mini-games were taken out. They were like one of the most fun parts of the original Pokemon Stadium games. But I still had fun with the game, despite its qualms. But now we get into the cream before the crop. The games that I enjoyed enough to give like an 8 or 9 out of 10 to might not be my all-time favorite games, but I still think they're great. And we got a lot to talk about here, so like I said, let's jump in. I'll be clear when I point out that WarioWare, even today, is just as good a series as it's always been, but this particular era with WarioWare Smooth Moves on the Wii, as well as WarioWare Touched, which I gave Game of the Year to in 2005, maybe surprisingly to some, was truly the peak of the WarioWare series. Touched is my favorite in the series. This one is pretty much right behind it. In a lot of ways, it feels like the Wii Remote and the WarioWare series were almost made for each other, and I feel like Smooth Moves was one of the best showcases of what the Wii Remote was capable of. It helps that the collection of minigames here was incredibly fun, and the absurdist charm and humor of WarioWare really lended itself well to being on the Wii for a couple different reasons. One of them being that the Wii was a console that truly anyone could pick up and play, no matter their age, gender, gaming experience, what have you. And admittedly, it was a system that probably felt a little goofy to play at times. Doing some of the Wii Remote motions probably made you feel silly, which is perfect for a series like WarioWare because WarioWare is known for being the best kind of silly. Beyond the base microgames, I also got a big kick out of some of the multiplayer games, which were just as goofy and off the wall as you would hope out of a series like this. And sure, some of the Wii Remote forms were a touch odd to control at times, but all in all, this was a great WarioWare game, and a game that I can very highly recommend. Okay. Here's where we really start to get into the Matt doesn't love God of War as much as everyone else arc that might make some people upset with me, and to those people, I apologize in advance. I don't take pleasure in saying that, I just have to say it. God of War 2 is a great game. Let's get that right. I'll never take that away from it. But am I the only one that when I played God of War 2, I felt like I was just playing a little more of the first game? Like, sure, you can say it's because I played God of War 2 right after playing God of War 1, but I've done that with plenty of other franchises, and it's often a thing where I can see how the franchise evolved and iterated from sequel to sequel to sequel. But with God of War 2, I felt like it was treading water at more than a few points. It's still a great game, but I just feel like given all the hype I constantly hear around the God of War franchise, I just feel like I should have enjoyed it a little more. Throw this one in the pile of games that I gave an 8 out of 10 to, but somehow still expressed some disappointment in. That same pile that I put Alan Wake 2 in the 2023 video. Because throughout the rest of the series, we will see more of those. Games that I'm like, yeah, it's great, it's like an 8 out of 10, but I was kind of disappointed. This is why you don't just take the number rating and run with it. Nevertheless, though, it's definitely impressive what they were able to accomplish here with God of War 2 being a 2007 game on a PlayStation 2. Like, they really squeezed as much out of the PlayStation 2 late in its life as they were able to. And I think they were able to polish up just enough in the right areas for this to succeed. Sure, I might not be as madly in love with it as some others are, but I do think God of War 2 is still a great game, and one you'll probably find even better than I did. I'm here to definitively say that not everything that came from the Paper Mario franchise after Thousand Year Door was bad. In fact, I don't think much of it was bad, even if a lot of it wasn't really to my tastes. Like, I won't lie, I couldn't get into Color Splash or Origami King, but that's not because they're bad, they just really weren't for me. Now, Super Paper Mario, on the other hand, I can definitively say is a great game. Let it be known that this is not the Paper Mario you grew up with on the Nintendo 64 or GameCube with the turn-based RPGs. This is more of a 2D platformer with some very light RPG elements, and sure, that might be enough to keep some people away, especially because some of the things that bothered people about the later games can kind of be traced back to this one, but it's still a very fun game. The visual style is vibrant and lively, the gameplay remains fresh and enjoyable to this day, and while Paper Mario has never been too difficult, I think this is a perfect beginner-friendly Paper Mario game that can easily be recommended to anyone. Don't be surprised if you hear me say that about a lot of first-party Wii games from this point forward. I do think the gameplay changes may make the game lose a little something to those who grew up on the previous titles, but otherwise, Super Paper Mario is still, like I said, a very great game. And damn, speaking of Paper Mario, I gotta get back to playing the Thousand Year Door remake. I've been so busy that I haven't gotten to play it as much as I'd like to, and I only just finished Glitzville. Come on, Matt, pull it together. Okay, so this is the first video in a while where I don't have a licensed game to go all apologist for, but this is where we get into the arc of Matt really likes baseball games. Yes, I'm a pretty big baseball fan, and I live in Philadelphia, so you know it's Go Phils, because we're talking about the fight-ins here. The fight-ins! Said! But obviously, especially in my early baseball-loving part of my life, around, say, 2010, 2011, I was so into the sport that I just started finding whatever baseball games I could get my hands on. Often on the Wii because I was the weird kid that actually liked motion controls. And MLB Power Pros was a game I actually had a lot of fun with, and still do. As a baseball sim, it felt deeper than I think it had any right to be, and as simple as the motion controlled aspect was, I still enjoyed it a lot. It was also satisfying using money that you earned from games to buy player cards for each team, and I was able to buy all of them, which felt pretty awesome. And I also loved the Success Mode, which I think is a larger part of the Power Pros series, which originated in Japan and is very popular. But Success Mode was a unique take on the My Player kind of mode that had like a story featuring a player character going through college and trying to make it to the big leagues. There were also these concepts of like, he's got a friend of his that he's always hanging around with that sometimes can make his decisions for him. He's trying to maintain his love life, get a part-time job, all this stuff. And there were some RPG elements to it as well. It was really interesting for a create-a-player kind of mode, and it's kind of sad that baseball games have not really gone with something like this in the years since. I mean, I know that MLB The Show has kind of some story-like elements to its Road to the Show mode, but it's not anywhere close to what Success was. All in all, yeah, this is still a great game today, and I could definitely recommend giving it a look. Or if it's hard to find and you don't mind sacrificing the MLB players, there's a new Power Pros game that just came to the Switch, and that's actually a pretty fun game, and it's very cheap, so if you want, give that a look. Believe it or not, Ratchet & Clank Future Tools of Destruction was the first Ratchet & Clank game that I ever owned. I saw a video from a now-defunct YouTube channel that has probably been defunct for many years, but I still remember the channel, of someone who was just showing their PlayStation 3 collection, and they showed this game, and I thought the box art looked cool, so I asked my brother to buy it and he was willing. I wouldn't end up beating it until over a decade later because, as I said, for the longest time, I was too obsessed with Guitar Hero and Super Smash Bros. To beat my games like a good boy. But thankfully, my brother fell in love with the game and would eventually end up buying the other games, and he'd become a hardcore Ratchet & Clank fan himself, to the point where he even played and beat most, if not all, of these spin-offs and offshoots in the series. He's a much stronger man than I. But obviously, when I did start beating my games like a good boy, I became a huge Ratchet & Clank fan, and this game was one I was really looking forward to going to and finally beating because it was my first Ratchet & Clank game, and it's one of my favorites in the series. Playing this right after Deadlock, the jump from the PS2 to the PS3 was so staggering to witness visually, and the great thing is that it didn't come in disservice to the gameplay. This was an incredibly smooth game with tight controls and fantastic level design that remains among the most memorable stuff that the series has come through with at this point. I do think the 6-axis motion controls feel a tiny bit shoehorned, but even so, it's still a great game and very much a huge favorite of mine. God, I wish PS3 games were somehow natively backwards compatible with the PS5 so that this could get reissued and more people could play it. Yes, it's happening. I'm actually talking positively about a Call of Duty game in one of these videos. Literally just after filming a video about the Xbox show where I had to talk about Call of Duty and basically took a, it's Call of Duty kind of approach, I am talking positively about a COD game. But quite frankly, this is probably one I won't be alone in talking positively about because Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, in my opinion, is the peak of the Call of Duty series, and there are probably many other people who would say that same thing. And I've played many of the COD games since this one, just because I've had friends or family members who have owned them, so I've gotten to try them out. And I think the series can genuinely be fun in spurts, even if it's not anything incredible. But I feel like this was the game that truly got it right, not just in terms of multiplayer, but also in terms of single player. This was where the COD series was really firing on all cylinders. I would honestly say that the campaign is still perhaps the best that Activision has put forward in a Call of Duty game. And it's something I've been begging for them to top. And the action and shooting mechanics are just as thrilling today as they were in 2007. Weirdly, this is a game I almost gave a 10 out of 10 to after I played and beat it finally, but I docked a point, and I know this might sound like a petty reason, but it's how I felt. I docked a point because I played it through the Modern Warfare Remastered edition that came out in 2016, and that was wrapped in a litany of bad business practices and decisions that truly confounded me and still kind of do, like the decision to add microtransactions to a game that at the time of release was like 9 years old. But even still, Modern Warfare 1 is the peak of Call of Duty to me, whether you're playing the remaster or the original version. And even with everything that we have from the series today, this is still a game I can highly recommend returning to, especially if you're like me and you prefer more single-player focused shooters. While I have my unpopular takes when it comes to the aforementioned Sony franchise God of War, one Sony franchise I don't have quite as many unpopular takes on is Uncharted. I mean, I'll spoil right now that I didn't rate any of the games in this series a 10 out of 10 on my personal scale, but that doesn't mean I don't love these games. Matter of fact, when I don't have as many games to play, I kind of want to go back and play them again. I think they're all very good in their own way, and even going back to Uncharted Drake's Fortune was a fun ride. When I was younger, I watched my brother play this game all the time, but I'd never played it myself because, again, I wasn't good at beating games or playing games outside of Guitar Hero and Smash, so I got a lot of my experience from watching my brother. But yeah, Uncharted, I feel like, in a way, was a huge trailblazer for the gaming industry. At the time of its release, Uncharted was one of the first games to truly have the look and the feel and the production values of a cinematic film. One of the first times that gaming kind of stood tall amongst actual works of cinema. It was perhaps one of the first times where a game truly felt like it could be as epic in scale and high in production value as a film you would go watch in a theater. Obviously, that's such a common thing in the industry today that it could be harder to appreciate now, and it might fall victim to the Seinfeld is unfunny trope, which I'm just now finding out that TV tropes changed the name of to once original, now common. The other name rolled off the tongue better, but I get why they changed it, and it's fine now. Admittedly, I do have one little hot take when it comes to Uncharted, and I think it's that it being a trailblazer, like I said, was both the best and worst thing to happen to the industry. The best in that, yes, it proved that gaming could be used to create something akin to a cinematic work, but the worst in the sense that the attention to creating pieces of cinema in a game has led to a lot of developers and publishers focusing so heavily on beautiful graphics and intricate storytelling to the point where they neglect what I feel is the most important part of a video game, the gameplay. After all, the interactiveness of gaming is, to me, the best part. They call it a video game, not a video movie. And I think there have been some cases where it feels like some developers and publishers have taken the wrong lessons from this game. But thankfully, when making this game, Naughty Dog did remember to make it fun, as even though the controls can feel a bit wonky today, the overall gameplay is still an absolute blast to play. It feels like an interesting evolution of what Naughty Dog was doing with something like Jak and Daxter, but on a little more of a grown-up scale, with a little more emphasis on third-person shooting as well. And obviously it should be said that this game, along with another game we'll talk about a few videos from now, were huge in terms of shaping what a lot of Sony's first-party approach has been in the years since. And even though it has some age-related warts, it's still way too much fun to pass up on, and it's definitely a massively important title that I highly recommend checking out for yourself. And lastly, in the cream before the crop, given how much love I was giving to Guitar Hero in the last video, you had to know that I would add Rock Band to that in this one. The OG Guitar Hero devs at Harmonix would move on to make this franchise and expanded upon what they had done with Guitar Hero to make a full-on band title that up to 4 players could play. It was pretty much the logical step forward, and Harmonix made it work in a big way. The full band gameplay translated perfectly here, even though I think that the Rock Band guitars were not as good as Guitar Hero's guitars, and the drums also had their share of faults too. But the game's still a lot of fun, and I think the setlist is honestly among the best in any rhythm game that there is. A lot of big-time favorites in this setlist, and I think they translated well to a game like this. And even with some early installment jank, this was a great step forward for Harmonix, though one I once again had to dock some points on for a possibly weird reason. Because on one hand, like I said, I hate the Rock Band 1 peripherals. They're gross. But also, when I owned this game back in the day, I had the Wii version, which, despite coming out 7 months after the 360 and PS3 version, had about half the features, which was a big disappointment. But still, this is a great game, and it's sad that the Rock Band series didn't quite live as long as it should have because of market and oversaturation and things like that. But still, this game bangs. That was just the cream before the crop. Now we're into the best list, and we got 4 games to talk about here. So let's not waste any more time. Let's jump into the number 4, my 4th favorite game of 2007, and you had to know this franchise was going to get a 10 out of 10 at some point from me. I gotta go with Halo 3. If Halo 2 was the moment where gaming got onto the level of being a blockbuster event, Halo 3 was that times 12. This was a huge moment of gaming stepping outside of its little bubble and little world that it once existed in. And I talk a lot about the you had to be there moments in gaming, and while I wasn't deeply paying attention to Halo 3 because I was 9 when it came out, it definitely feels like this was a moment you simply had to be there for. Like how the first 2 Halos were the reason you bought an OG Xbox, Halo 3 was the reason you bought an Xbox 360. And what a reason, because like I said, Halo 3 is still the peak of the series in my opinion. Everything that's always made Halo great is here in spades, but it's also by far the most polished entry in the franchise, and where the previous games had some mini frustrations to them here and there, this game basically wiped all of those away. The sheer amount of content and replayability of the campaign was excellent, the level design was immaculate, and even features like the Forge level editor were pretty great. And of course, Halo's multiplayer has always been a huge part of the hype, and why not? I never got to play it back in the day, but I heard it was pretty peak. This is still genuinely one of the most exceptional first-person shooters I've ever played, and it's a game that absolutely delivers on all fronts. But would you believe there's actually a first-person shooter I liked better than Halo 3 in 2007? You probably wouldn't, but yes, my number 3 favorite game of 2007, I gotta go with Metroid Prime 3 Corruption. Okay, this time I truly promise I did not wear the Samus shirt anticipating that I would talk about Metroid Prime 3. I just happened to be wearing this shirt. Again, I have so few summer shirts I could wear without getting stupid hot, so Samus shirt it is, and it so happens I'm talking about Metroid, so woo. But yeah, maybe it might be a surprise to hear it, but Metroid Prime 3 Corruption is actually my favorite game in the entire Metroid series. Whether we're talking the base Metroid series or the Prime sub-series, this is actually my favorite game in the series. And I know some might think it's nostalgia because this was the Metroid game I played the most in my youth, but even going back to it today, I still absolutely love it. As I mentioned when talking about the previous Wii re-releases of the Prime trilogy, Metroid Prime 3 features by far some of the best uses of the Wii's motion controls that I've ever experienced, and the game's worlds are absolutely incredible and great to explore. I know it's a polarizing topic when Metroid goes for a more linear approach because the whole idea of a Metroidvania is that there's a lot of backtracking in a big giant world, but I honestly think this game pulled it off perfectly just because each planet was so fantastic to explore. In a lot of ways, like I had said earlier, when I was talking about Super Paper Mario, I look at this as a perfect game for beginners to get into Metroid with. Again, the other ones are so big that they could be really confusing to explore for some people, but this one is pretty straightforward. Also, the phase-on powers are just so badass. Like, they're so cool. And I mean, this game just truly enthralls me in every way possible constantly. it's still a game I absolutely love going back to. I truly hope that Prime 2 and 3 get those rumored Switch remasters, and I hope that Prime 4 is really as close as some leakers are making it out to be. At number 2, another game that was a huge you had to be there moment in gaming because this was absolutely everywhere. Once again, you know I love the series, and this game is the absolute peak of it, and it's a game that has way too much of a personal impact for me to rank any lower. I gotta go with Guitar Hero 3 Legends of Rock. I mentioned in my 2001 video that Super Smash Bros. Melee is probably the game I've put the most time into in my life, and I stand by that being true, but this game probably falls right behind it. I mean, I've owned it for 3 different systems at different times in my life, so that should tell you everything you need to know. Again, this was also my first Guitar Hero game, and believe it or not, it was a Christmas present that I didn't think I wanted at the time. I didn't ask for it, it just kind of like ended up under the tree and all that. I played it a little bit, but quickly put it down and just rarely came back. You know that whole thing when you're a kid and you suck at something so you don't want to keep doing it. But one day, little 9-year-old Matt tried it out because he was bored, got through Slow Ride on easy, thought it was fun, and suddenly got absolutely hooked, to the point where I had a years-long obsession with it that I struggled to shake. Yep, it happens to the best of us. I initially had the Wii version, but I'd later get the PS3 version because I wanted to play the DLC songs, and eventually I got the 360 version because that's where all my friends were. What? I wanted to play online. And yeah, like I said, this is still my favorite entry in the series to date, and it's probably going to stay that way. As Neversoft's first venture into Guitar Hero, they really polished things up in a big way, created perhaps my favorite Guitar Hero peripheral. Still wish I had one of these bad boys. And they had a set list of absolute gems, songs that I still love going back to this day. And as much as people criticize the game for its difficulty, I personally love that because there were just so many fun songs to play. It does help that I play a lot of rhythm games on high difficulties, so of course I love the more challenging stuff. Though I still have not full comboed through the Fire and Flames on Expert. Though I can do like a technical full combo of it because I've FC'd each individual part of the song. I just can't do it all in one run. I mean, it's like 7.5 minutes. It's too tall a mountain to climb. Still, while I don't play it that much today because of Clone Hero being the essential replacement, this is by far one of the most important games in my life, and it's a game that's had a huge personal impact on me as a gamer, a fan of music, and even as a musician. And that's something I feel can stretch further than even some games I like better than it. That significance is insanely important to me. And it's, yeah, a pretty huge deal. But even with that incredible significance, there is still one game from 2007 that tops it. My absolute favorite game of 2007. You guys are probably already screaming it at the screen because you already know what it is. So let's not beat around the bush any longer. My favorite game of 2007, of course, is Super Mario Galaxy. I mean, come on. I know this might be my love of Mario showing, but could it have really been anything else? I'm sure many of you have this at your #1 spots as well. Some of you probably even have it as your #1 favorite game of all time. And why not? I mean, Super Mario Galaxy is an absolute treasure. I didn't have this in the script, but I also just remembered this was the first mainline Mario game that I properly owned on a console that was not a re-release, because I had owned Super Mario 64 and Super Mario Bros. And Mario World through Virtual Console, but this was the first one that I actually owned in its original form. I didn't have an N64 growing up, and I got into the GameCube too late to play Sunshine, so this was my first one. And again, I didn't get to play it enough as a kid because I was bad at beating my games, but in going back to it, I mean, obviously, it's a masterpiece. While the experimentation of Sunshine might have rubbed a few people the wrong way, Galaxy was a game that hooked many and was a prime reason to own a Wii. It's a testament to Nintendo's overall design philosophy that they were able to kind of go back to basics, but simultaneously make something so fresh, inventive, and different. Super Mario Galaxy, like many of Mario's finest adventures, is truly a one-of-a-kind game, and it's one of those games that you can play and then afterwards just really say, man, there's really nothing like this, even though there is a sequel, but you know what I mean. The space-based physics and sphere walking, the latter of which Nintendo had been trying to implement for years since its Super Mario 128 tech demo, make the platforming even more challenging and rewarding, and the level design is so fantastic in the sense that it always feels like I'm learning something new in each level, and always finding new layers and new things to discover. The controls and the camera are also damn near perfect, some of the best the Wii has ever put forward, and the visuals, my goodness, the visuals. Even on an underpowered system like the Wii, this game is still a visual treat, and the music is obviously incredible. It's Mario. You shouldn't be surprised. Mario music is among the best in the business. Oh, and while storytelling is never a huge centerpiece of Mario because you know the story, Bowser kidnaps Peach, Mario saves Peach, Mario wins. This game added some backstory with Rosalina, a new character, and I think the added backstory is quite emotional, and it's a nice little add-on to the game to give it a little extra flavor compared to some of the other ones. I could honestly go on for a few more hours about the game if you let me, but I think I'll just leave it at this. Super Mario Galaxy is a Hall of Fame level game, and one of the greatest that I've ever experienced. It's the kind of game that everyone should play, and if for some reason you haven't played it yet, well, stop waiting around and go play it. I give you permission to stop watching the video and go play the game. I promise. Okay, but yeah, that was 2007 as a year in gaming, and it was a great year. A lot of awesome games that I got to talk about, and a lot of cherished memories, too. A lot of these games, like I said, were among the first in their respective franchise that I owned, so obviously that's very cherished. 2008 might be a little bit of a tough act to follow, but there were still a lot of great games to talk about from that year, and I'm very excited to. But until then, this is all just my opinion on 2007 as a year in gaming. What was your favorite game of 2007? What were games that you played a lot of? What were the games that you loved the most? What are your cherished memories from 2007 as a year in gaming? Whatever your thoughts, opinions, and experiences are, leave them down in the comments below. Let's keep this civil and have some fun as we like to do. If you guys want to hit like and subscribe and support some of my other ventures that I have linked in the description, thank you. If not, it's no big deal. I totally understand. And yeah, next video is going to be on 2008, unless sometime in the process of me filming this right now on June 9th and whenever this video goes up, a Nintendo Direct gets announced, because it's still not E3 season, so there's still time for a Nintendo Direct, and we're going to be getting one this month anyway, so assume the next video will be 2008, but if a Nintendo Direct gets announced before the 08 video goes up, assume the next video will be a Nintendo Direct. Just trying to cover my bases. Also, I've been filming for like an hour and a half and it's hot in this room, so I'm starting to get to that point where I'm not fully thinking straight. Anyway, obviously, a lot coming, so stay tuned for that, but until next time, thank you guys for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.